Very excited about my gavel. Good morning, everybody. I am calling to order the Thursday, January 22nd Finance and Administration Committee meeting. And I'd like to ask Terry if you could do a roll call.
Good morning. Director Ranjiv Kush for Vice Chair Jed Smith
Here.
and Chair Diana Mayer.
Here.
Thank you.
And we're going to now move on to public comment on non-agenda matters.
There are none.
So now we'll move on to regular items, beginning with agenda item 3A, which is the minutes of the Finance and Administration Committee meeting from November 20th, 2025. Can I get a recommendation to accept the minutes?
So moved. I recognize that I wasn't here for that meeting, but I have reviewed the minutes and so I put forward a motion to accept the minutes.
And second?
Okay, so you accept the minutes. Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, I forgot to ask for public comment on the minutes. Are there any public comments on the minutes? No. Okay.
There are none.
Okay. And then, so the comments will be accepted as submitted, and then we're going to move on to 3B, the annual comprehensive financial report, and we have Brett Uppendahl here to talk about that.
Thank you, Chair Mayer, and good morning, Director Kush. My name is Brett Uppendahl, the district's finance director. I have with me here Shelley Riley, the district's finance manager, and we have via Zoom David Alvey, who is a partner and a CPA from our independent external auditor, Mays and Associates. The item before you here today is for review and comment on the annual comprehensive financial report and the auditor's memo of internal control and required communications for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. And I will turn it over to David for the majority of this presentation, as his team worked closely with our team over the last 9+ months to compile this report. But before I do turn it over to David, I did want to thank Shelley and her accounting team for all the hours they put in, not only for the actual audit, but for all the work that they are auditing, all the daily transactions and daily oversight, and all the work they do in order to get ourselves to this point. I'm proud of the team. We have another unqualified opinion from our auditor, so that means we've done a good job in fairly presenting our financial statements. And I will turn it over to David to present more of the actual presentation. David?
Great. Good morning. Good morning, committee members. My name is David Alvey, and full disclosure, I'm actually covering for Vic Rodriguez. She is the engagement partner on the audit, but she is out currently. But my role every year is to come in and audit the financial statements and to render an audit opinion of whether or not we think the financials presented to you, prepared by management, are materially correct. Next slide. Perfect. So the background of the audit is we're the independent external auditor. That means that our firm has no business dealings, no family members at the district. We actually go through a risk assessment where we ask all of the members of the team to make sure there's no relatives or anything that could possibly skew our opinion. We conducted the audit in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. And like Brett mentioned on page 1 of the audit report, actually page 1 to 3 is our audit opinion. Technically, that's the only piece of this document that my firm owns, but it is a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion, and that's the highest level of assurance that a CPA firm can give an entity. So congratulations, you passed your audit. Next slide, please. So going over some financial highlights on the statement of net position on page 14 and 15, kind of like the balance sheet, right? We have your assets and your liabilities and that sort of thing in your net position. So you ended the year, June 30, 2025, with a net position of $365 million. That was a $58 million increase over last year. And a lot of those changes and cause of that increase, obviously the revenues, exceeded expenses, but you also had a really big increase in capital assets of $30 million, and your cash and investments did increase by $24 million. Next slide. So on the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, this is where you have your revenues and your expenses and your beginning net position and your ending. Your revenues and capital contributions was $162 million, and that exceeded your expenses of $104 by $58 million. That was the increase in your net position from last year to current year. Your operating revenues increased 25 million or 20%. And that has to do with the restructuring of the rates that were happening and the increase in sales. Your operating expenses increased by 9.5 million or 10%. That has to do with just increase in salaries and benefits and increase in purchase power. And your non-operating income decreased by 2 million or 78%. And that really has to do with in last year, June 30, 2024, you had a federal grant for the arrears from the feds. So that's, you didn't have that this year. Next slide. So kind of an overview of the audit process just before we get into the memorandum on internal controls. When we do our audit, we do it in two phases. We do it in an interim phase and a final phase. During our interim phase, we're looking at checks and balances. We're making sure that there's segregation of duties. We're making sure that not a single person can initiate, approve, and book a transaction without a second set of eyes on that, because that could be ripe for an error. And when we're doing that, we're looking like at journal entries, disbursements, payroll, revenue collection, and there's no materiality in our interim phase. If you're not following your purchasing policy on a $10 purchase, that holds just as much clout if that was a $10,000 purchase. So once we get an idea of the internal control of the district, we turn off that part of our brain and we come back after the books are closed and final. Now we're looking at balances. We're checking your cash balances, your debt balances, your capital asset activity, pension, OPEB, all those balances gets tested, and then we issue our opinion. So the memorandum on internal controls and required communication is my firm's communication to this committee of things that we found during the audit. And they can be categorized in those first three bullets: material weakness, significant deficiency, and other matters. A material weakness is that something material can flow through that internal control process and not get caught and cause a material variance on your financials in front of you. We have none of those. Significant deficiency, that something significant can flow through that internal control process and cause a significant error on your financials. Nothing to report there. And the only thing we have in the other matters section is just upcoming government accounting standard board pronouncements. We have two coming over the next couple of years, and they're not really that big. The required communication part of this is auditing standards require that I tell you that we had no disagreements with management. We had no issues with management's estimates or assumptions. As accountants, we have to make estimates and assumptions. You know, fair market value of an investments, that's a assumption or an estimate. Useful life of capital assets, that's an estimate as well. And even technically, the pension and other post-employment benefit assumptions in there, rate of return, long-term rate of return, that sort of thing, have to be signed off by management. And we look at those during our audit, and we had no issues with those assumptions. We don't think our scope was limited or management was withholding any information. And we don't think that management had a second CPA firm waiting in the wings just in case we didn't issue an unmodified opinion. And with that, I just want to open up to any questions you might have. And I want to thank Brett and Shelley for all their hard work. You know, as this only comes to, you know, into the report comes into the limelight once a year. But this is truly to get a clean audit opinion and no comments on the memorandum on internal controls. That's truly a testament of a years long work of sound financial policies and procedures. I just want to thank Brett and Shelley and the finance team.
Great, thank you. And Director Kush, you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you, David, for walking us through your report. You know, for a board member, nothing is better than hearing an unmodified or clean opinion for an audit. And I think we also know that that's no small feat to achieve for an organization with the complexity of Marin Water and the size of our budget. So I will also, you know, congratulate Brett, Shelley, and team for another good year of, I think, accounting practices. So great to hear. That's it, Dana. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, I want to echo that. And thank you, David. And thank you, Brett and Shelley. I thought also the document that you prepared for the auditors was great. I imagine David would agree, super comprehensive and helpful. I just had one question, David, which is in the report, a number of times you would talk about like a slight delta or discrepancy from you would say like this year was 268 million as compared to 230 million. And there would be nothing saying what the comparison was, like at the year or what. So I'm assuming that was from the prior fiscal year. Is that a fair assumption to make when you didn't
Yes.
specify?
Yes. So we're looking at June 30, 2025 compared to June 30, 2024 prior year.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I don't
And
think
to that point,
yeah.
within the report, the management discussion and analysis, which is kind of in the right after the audit opinion, so page 4 is probably where it starts, is a real good executive summary of kind of what
Great.
happened through the year, and that gives a lot of again, that's written by management and it gives a lot of insight of why the numbers changed, and then you see it in the footnotes and the financials.
Okay, great. That was kind of another question is that, I mean, I thought all the information was helpful, but I was sort of looking for like a high level summary and that's good. I think I read that, but, that's good to know. I think, let's see. So at this point, I think we'll just move to any public comments on this agenda item.
There are none.
Okay. So, thank you for that. And, see, I don't need to do anything. I think we just are moving on to item 3C. Is that right? Okay, which is the training program update. Miss Gray.
Yes. No, just getting to the document is another. Right there. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Terry. Okay. Good morning, Chair, Mayor, Director Cush, and everyone else. Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Here, thank you. Thanks. Here this morning to give an update on the district's training program. So as part of the strategic plan, the district established a goal of organizational excellence, and one of the objectives was organizational culture and values, providing a value-focused team and engaged and high-performing teams. And to get there, oh yeah, no problem.
This is not it's not showing.
It's not showing on the
It's not
screen. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So I just figured out something to add to the training list. How to manage the technology at a board meeting. So,
I don't even think you should try.
It's been like this all week too. So you know.
Thank you. As I mentioned, the organizational goal is organizational excellence and culture and value, and bringing value to the employee experience, and we can do that through a training program. And so our charge was to develop a broad-based training program to support employees. Right now, the training that we have is decentralized, and bringing it all together and getting a holistic look at what we're doing provides for us to be able to do a better needs assessment of the training and to get, just close gaps and develop an actual training program. So by just looking at a holistic view. So our district training program objectives are to continue training for managers, supervisors. That's our leadership training program that we have. Conduct a needs assessment to identify training priorities for district staff, and offer technical and soft skills training and target training that boosts performance. And that's just really to support the employee and hopefully contribute positively to the employee experience. So those are our training plan objectives, goal objectives. The current state of our training program, we currently provide leadership training. So for our newly hired or newly promoted managers, supervisors, or leads, they receive equivalent to 3 days of training with time in between each training session for completing assignments related to the training and also to apply the concepts. And we did offer for those people who had gone through the Leadership Academy and people who are currently going through a refresher not too long ago, where we offered a refresher on leadership sessions on training, workplace culture, how to resolve conflicts, how to delegate tasks, assignments, and projects, and coaching for employees. We also offer employee relations training. So the district is part of a consortium, and it's coordinated by a law firm, Liebert Cassidy Whitmore. It's an employment law firm. And the employee relations consortium is comprised of a number of special districts in this area. And special district cities and counties. And we meet once a year to talk about the training program, and then the consortium provides training for our managers and supervisors. So see, these are a few of the topics that they have provided in the last year. We also provide training on compliance training on mandatory items such as harassment prevention, reasonable suspicion. So we know what to look for if to document behaviors or activity that we know what to document, excuse me. If we think somebody's under the influence, what to document, how to act, and how to move forward. So. We also offer training to main certifications. So we have our water treatment, water distribution training, commercial driver's license training, and legal training. And these are just a few. These are just examples. This is not our full training catalog. And we have department-specific training and also technical training. So AutoCAD training for our engineering group, and then for our operations group, we offer, training like forklift training and generator training and SCADA training. Our recruiters are also trained to look at best practices, trends in the industry, what's legal to put on job postings, what's not, how to attract different generations in the workforce. So we do offer training at the district, but we could do better. And that's why we wanted to have this needs assessment. And so to get there, we had meetings with division directors, managers and supervisors. We looked at the 5-year strategic plan. We met with the Ripple committee. We also reviewed all of the job descriptions in the organization just to identify trends, things, training that can be provided for all staff, and then training that could be specific to the job classification. And our goal was to identify gaps and make sure that it's aligned with our goals. Looking at the strategic plan, we're looking at what's coming up, what kind of training can support those goals. We wanted to make sure there was cohesiveness in the training. How can we improve effectiveness and support the employee overall? So, and from the training needs assessment, we identified that we need to have training tracks. So leadership training tracks. So we have training tracks for our senior leaders, managers, supervisors, and leads. And then we would continue with the Leadership Academy that is currently in place, but the refresher courses would be specific to the person's position in the organization and how we can support them in their current role. The needs assessment determined we need a little more MOU training or union contract training. We did provide some training after we ratified the last union contract, but it's good to have, continuous training on the union provisions. We would like to have more training on district policies. Right now, we put the trainings, we post them in our learning management system for people to read and, know that there's a change in the policy, but it would be good to, have some kind of workshop or something, or maybe a brown bag or whatever to go over the new policies. And then we'd like district training on the contract process. So that would be like our internal district process training. Systems training, we're in the process of migrating over to a new SAP system, as you've heard. And so as we're doing that, we're building training and change management programs so that people can understand how to use the new system, how to adapt to it, and understand why we're doing what we're doing. So we're in the process of doing that. And then most recently, our IT group just did a training on Microsoft 365, as we move to that new platform. So, and then soft skills training, we want to look at that, and we're going to look at the cadence of that and make sure that it's effective and timely for employees. So this is just this is an example of a technical skills training profile. So I mentioned that we looked at job descriptions, and so this is our construction inspector. And so for a construction inspector, these are examples of some type of training, training that a construction inspector would need to be proficient in his or her position, in their position. And, they also wanted training on contract administration and construction law. So, I thought was pretty good. So, and all of these are outcomes from meetings with the managers and the supervisors about their various positions. And then as part of the needs assessment, of course, you have resources. You'll need to identify the resources. So we are looking at vendors to provide training, leadership training, business practices, technical skills. We do rely on our internal subject matter experts. As I mentioned, the IT team rolled out the 365 training for us, so that was great. We do a lot of internal training, and we do have people in-house who are available to train our coworkers on different skill sets. And then we are looking at how we manage this training program overall. We're leaning towards hiring another analyst for this position, somebody that has their pulse on the organization, understanding of the needs for our, strategic needs. We had a great conversation in our senior leadership team meeting about what we want to do going forward and how we want to manage this program and what are our needs. So we do need somebody here to manage the calendar, manage the contracts for the consultants, develop training, provide training. So that's the direction that we're going in. So our goal, one big goal, is to get a full-time person to do this work here. So
Well, it's not a new position, to be clear.
yeah,
It's
replace.
what we brought on as part of the strategic plan and talking to the board, a training position. And she led this assessment that Vicky just reviewed and left the district for personal reasons. So the thought was, as we do with every vacant position, we review it and do we need to fill it? Is it the right classification? That sort of thing. So we've gone through that review, and as Vicky noted, we've concluded that this is important and we do need to fill it pretty much in kind. We did learn from the first go round, so we'll be maybe a little smarter, but yeah, and we look at this, I mean, this is a big effort. This is like a 5 to 10 year, eating the elephant, just slowly building the framework for this really long-term sustainable program, hopefully.
So as we move forward, our goal, we want to map out our training year, and as I mentioned, establish training contracts, and then continue to provide training as identified in the assessment that was completed. We would evaluate effectiveness, and having a person here would help us to do that. We were taking evaluations for some of the programs that we launched, and that's very helpful. And then we continue to revisit the training needs assessment and adjust as necessary. That's it.
Great, thank you. Director Kush, you have any questions or?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Thank you, Vicky, for a good overview. I think, we've, for a while now, we've been discussing the importance of these activities, and, it's so important that we continue to strengthen our programs. Just maybe two things that would be good to hear your thoughts on. One is I see that some of the associations, like the American Waterworks Association, offer a lot of training opportunities. It seems like one of the things they try to build some reputation around is, do you see, and Ben, you may also have a sense of how useful those are for us. Is that something that are those opportunities that we are engaging with, or should we be engaging with more?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I was going back to the previous slide because at one point I did have some training from the American Waterworks
Okay.
Association on there, but I think I
Okay.
may have deleted it. So, yeah, we do want to leverage training provided by associations in all areas. We in human resources, we're involved with associations, California Public Employee Relations Association, and so we would the same with those other technical positions in engineering. We would really rely on training in those with those associations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot of places that provide different sorts of training, and I think, yeah, it's tapping the right ones and
Yeah.
building on it. And it's really being strategic. What are the needs? What are the priorities for the organization? And how do we really lift them up? And, like it's complicated. The technical training, if I think about AWWA, that's a sort of kind of, you look for opportunities. Maybe they'll have occasionally a special training for construction inspectors, or maybe that would be ASCE, the Civil Engineering Association, and you would jump on that because that's formidable. You look at that list of technical training is really, to some extent, for me, it's the sweet spot, but is also the most difficult because every classification has its own needs. And how do you think about that? But that's really what folks want. I mean, it's a mutual beneficial, but that develops, career progression opportunities and personal development and benefits the district. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a lot of aspects of a comprehensive training program, but yeah, absolutely. That's part of it.
Great. Good. Then, Vicky, last question. I think we all feel, some FOMO, fear of missing out with respect to AI.
Yeah.
And most of us are using chatbots now for a lot of, some professional and personal activities. Maybe when a new training analyst does come on board, that would be something to consider. Do we largely rely on AI that's going to be integrated into our existing software the way, now we have Microsoft Copilot through Microsoft 365. It's just available to us. I'm guessing most of us are using it. Or do we have more, also, in addition, should we consider more dedicated training around using chatbots effectively for your professional work, or it could be even for specific activities, I don't know, how to move forward on this, but just maybe something to flag, to
That would
keep
be
on
great.
in mind.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Diana. That's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vicki, for that presentation. Very helpful. Two small thoughts. One is that it's the identified priorities, the creating higher quality conversations. I just want to say from all my years of doing a lot of investigations and giving advice and counsel, I think the biggest thing that I wish more employers did trainings on was how to have difficult conversations. I think that we are in a place where everything has gotten so processed and formalized, like, the fact that, I mean, 90% of the time when I'm doing an investigation, the person hasn't even had a conversation with whoever is upsetting them to let them know how they're feeling, is really concerning to me. Usually by the time an investigation happens, it's like the idea of a repair of a relationship, it's just not going to happen because then. So I really laud that. And I think that's a really important training to look into it, to prioritize. Just my 2 cents. I'm forgetting the name of the firm that does all the public.
Liebert Cassidy Whitman.
Do they have like a portal, like do you pay a contract fee and then they have, okay. I just wanted to make sure you knew about that because like there's places like M-Train where now they're not going to have probably a lot of the job specific trainings. But they certainly, so I don't know if it would be worth the cost, but they do have excellent trainings and kind of everything under the sun. So, but probably with Liebert Cassie, you're going to get something that's more targeted. So,
Yeah, we do use their Liebert Library.
mm-hmm.
We have an annual subscription for that.
Yeah.
We're able to go in and look up, emerging, and they also do a legal update. So we participate in their legal updates. We use their Liebert Library, and we're able to look at laws that have changed, sample policies, and things like that based on new laws. So it's a really good resource.
That's great. Yeah, and I don't know if they do have softer skills trainings on there, but I think that would be a wonderful investment if they do. Okay, we have any public comment on this item?
There are none.
Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you so much, Vicki, and we're going to now move on to 3D, which is the monthly financial update.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we go. I think I got it up. All right. Again, my name is Brett Uppendahl, Finance Director. This is our regularly occurring monthly financial update. This will be for information as of December 31st, which puts us at exactly 50% of the fiscal year, halfway through. As you can see, we typically do the same slides here, each month. I have a couple at the end that tend to change a little bit, but just to kind of go through the routine metrics. Revenues here, looking generally pretty healthy if you look at it just in terms of percentage to the fiscal year. I'll talk a little bit in the next couple slides about, why that's actually not as good as we would hope right now. If you look at the bottom line, their operating revenue, 55% of the fiscal year. Typically at this time of the fiscal year, you want to be closer to 60 or even 65% because it's accounting for the real warm months that happen between July and October. And so you'll see that in a couple slides, kind of where that's starting to dip in recent readings or the last 2 months worth of meter reads. You can even see their comparison to last year. Last year, we were 58% of the fiscal year, so we're kind of slipping compared to last year. And again, we're 50% of the way through the year, so there's still quite a bit of data to come in. But I'll talk a little bit again in terms of the patterns. We're not going to see much of a change for the next few months as we're through the winter here, so those are our lower months. Capital revenue largely fixed. We do have some grants that are there, so we're relatively on track, 41% overall. As I mentioned, some of the grants there will be lagging as we try to build those out once the work is complete. But in terms of our actual capital maintenance fee revenue, those are coming in relatively on track. The good news, as it has been the last couple of years, is our expenditures are also a little bit behind. You can see here we just went over the 50% mark for expenses. Largely, though, that reflects the one-time payment we made to Sonoma County Water in December. And so within the maintenance and operations category, that kind of books the entire 12 million that we paid in that one-time fee all in 1 month. So it looks to be kind of pushing us ahead of our typical pace. But obviously that's a one-time payment, so we won't see that again. And so we'll see the numbers start to even out back towards that kind of 48, 47% kind of track that everything else is on. Capital expenses have increased, and so we are looking pretty good there. We're very, very close to our overall 50% number. It's at 43% now. I know we're getting a capital update later this month, and so we'll be able to dive in a little bit more there. But we are seeing some increased activity over the last few months in some of our larger capital projects. So that puts us on a good track getting into the spring here.
Brett, just quickly, is our expenses currently are slightly over our revenues at this point. Is that meaningful? I know that the last couple of years, we have ended it, with a good operating surplus. But
So our expenses in terms of operating surplus, we'll do our projections as we get in the next few months, and I'll talk about that in the last couple of slides. It's really hard to align our revenues with our expenses throughout the year,
Right.
as they're very,
Right.
kind of cyclical on the revenue side, and expenses tend to be a little bit more regular. I would say here, if you see here, operating revenue, our actuals there is 84.7, right? And then if you flip over to our operating expenses, we're still at 67.3. So we are still
Okay.
ahead of the game in terms of overall cash flow. In terms of where we expect to be in the year, though, that's where we're falling a little behind. So it's kind of the percent of the budget, the kind of the pace we're on for the year. So, I think you're correct in looking at the percentages that we're starting to kind of see a ratio that we don't want to see, kind of indicating more of a deficit for the year. But at least in terms of overall cash flow, we're in a good position so far through the year. And that's largely because we've recognized the kind of larger months in the revenue in the fall, and we're getting to the slower months of revenue. So definitely something to be concerned about and something I'm looking at. But actually, cash flow wise, we're okay position right now.
Okay. And then just what drove the increase in our other revenue for this fiscal year over last year?
Largely it is grants, and so other revenue typically is mostly grant driven. We have some small revenues, miscellaneous, fees and whatnot that do come in, but largely this is grants. And grants typically have a multiple year cycle. They're tied to our capital expenses, and so this is kind of reflecting once capital projects are closed out and we actually are able to bill those grants through, we can get them. So the other revenue, in most cases, is our grants.
Okay.
Okay, on to this one. And this one is always kind of the more important slide that I like to look at because it kind of really breaks down the revenue pieces. Obviously, water sales and the fixed fees that we have are the largest part of our overall revenue base. We did not have a report here in December, so you're actually seeing 2 months of kind of updated data. So if you look at the November and December, that's the new information to the board that we have out here. And that's really where we're starting to see this kind of slowdown in terms of overall revenue. You can see there for the first couple months on water sales, excuse me, we were closer to kind of a 10% lag. If you see August, September, October, and the water sales column on the left, those are, 90%, 89, 89. The last 2 months there in November and December, those kind of ticked down even farther down to the 20% lagging number. So I think we talked about it quite a bit in November. There's reasons for this. It's tied to the weather. It's tied to kind of the abnormally cool year that we had. It's tied to kind of ongoing, water efficiency efforts. So it's not a surprise necessarily to us. It just is, a little bit, kind of it's clear to see here when you look at these large months there, November and December, those would typically be our last 2 large months as we're closing out the year. And those are the months that we're falling short by a bigger amount. And as I'll talk about here, kind of as in the summary, you can see January, February, March, April, those are very small months. So we're not getting much in those. So we should, it's hard to make up kind of relatively kind of big prior losses with these smaller months coming in. So we're unlikely to see a big change in terms of the overall trajectory until we get into the May, June, into next year. So kind of more of a foreshadowing of what's to come. It's going to be a couple more months of relatively kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of the overall pace. That being said, I do expect us to be closer to our monthly numbers in January, February, March, and April because that is the winter months. You're not getting as much kind of variability in terms of outdoor water use. So I don't think we're going to continue to see this 20% below on a monthly basis. It's just hard to kind of use those smaller months to make up the gap that we currently have so far. So it'll be a concern, and we'll be looking into that, more closely as we get into that March timeframe, and we'll provide the board obviously updates as we get into next fiscal year.
So this really plays into, as we think about, this coming year, as we start to develop the rate process, the 4-year next rate process. As obviously, we'll have to have a budget that holds together with expenses and revenues. And this will be really the last full year of data that could be what, 10% under budget as much?
That's what we're looking at right now, in the 10%
Yeah,
range.
something like that. So, it's just going to be, some discussions with the board of, how to manage this. And we're already talking and thinking, and there's options and ideas that we'll be bringing to the board as we move forward.
Yeah, I think we've kind of been already preparing for this sort of pattern and how we might respond to it. So not a whole lot more to add at this stage. Brett, I just have a comment. And, I know we need to look at our budgets on an annual basis. That's how everything is set up. Revenues, expenses have to be considered on an annual basis. But, we are in this 4-year rate cycle. The first few years, we were coming in with revenue surpluses that we were targeting to build back our reserves. Does that reduce some of the stress that we would otherwise feel if, the prior years, does that reduce some of the stress that we would otherwise feel if we're, say, we're 10% below budget on revenues this year? Or is that not a good way to think about it?
No, I think that is a way to think about it. And I think, you're correct in the sense that we do have an annual budget. And especially in terms of our, audit process we just talked about in terms of how the way we, control our costs and track our revenues. But it is really important to take that multi-year look at things, especially in a utility, environment that we have. We have so many projects that span multiple years. We know that things come up and things go down over time. So I think with the board's approval of our reserve policy changes in the last couple of years, I think it really does kind of help buffer at least some of the impacts. And so, I don't know if I can comment on stress levels because it's hard to just kind of breeze through some of these numbers being low, but it does, allow us to not have to immediately have a knee-jerk reaction. As soon as we see things being low, we don't have to immediately pull the plug on projects that are in progress or do like a salary, like a hiring freeze to that nature. It gives us a little time to let the natural cycles of the years kind of play themselves out. The last few years, we have built up our reserves, and so we are in a really good position to withstand, 1 year of a shortfall. It's once you start getting into that 2 years or 3 years of a shortfall that you really have to make major changes. And so that's what General Manager Hornstein's talking about is we'll have to look at this more in that long-term lens for the next 4 years to decide how to kind of, right the ship going forward if we need to. If this is a 1-year blip, then, there's not as much to worry about. And we just kind of, chalk it up to that's why we have reserves and that's why we set up specific reserves for these revenue shortfalls. If we start to see a longer-term trend, then we have to make longer-term actions that match that. So I guess that's a way of saying it's less stress. It still is a stressful situation, to kind of see things going that way, especially given our experience in the last drought and knowing that, you don't know what next year is going to bring. It's not a guarantee it's going to come back, but at least we know we have time, and at least for staff, they can continue in the work they're doing, in this next, short-term period before we have to make any overreactions, basically.
Right. All right. Thank you for that.
And of course, the flip side to this is, the water resources aspect. I mean, the reason revenue short is we're seeing a lot of success working with our customers and our conservation program, keeping, the demand down, which is just great from a resource management and a resiliency standpoint. So it's the constant balance.
I on that point, Ben, it'll be some combination and ultimately of improving demand management and just weather patterns, right? We had these early rains this year that changed irrigation probably cycles. So it'll be some combination, right?
And I would say also the final thing on that, and it's a minor point in the sense of overall dollars, but when we are seeing lower demand, we do have some natural savings that exist that way as well. For instance, we don't have to buy as much Sonoma water, above our minimum. We don't have to spend as much on electricity in terms of pumping costs. So there are some natural savings that accrue. It's just not the same kind of range and scale here.
Right.
So
Right. Our fixed costs still are quite dominant.
yes, exactly. Okay, and as we mentioned the last few months, and the trend continues here. This is a look at kind of total consumption, through 6 months of the year, and you can see, obviously we had our big years there in fiscal year 20 and 21. We had our drought years, and we've been steadily increasing, kind of relatively, as predicted up until fiscal year 25. And then this year, fiscal year 26 is a much kind of different pattern or kind of a change in that overall trend. And so we're not only below last year by quite a bit, but we're also below our 10-year average. And that's really what's driving a lot of this. And we just kind of discussed that overall point in the last few minutes, so I won't belabor it here, but this does give you another kind of graphic look at, why the revenues are coming in short.
Yeah.
This is a chart, again, we've been bringing in the last few months in terms of the overall tiers and where those exist. And we did a deeper dive in November, and we'll do another deeper dive here, as we get closer to the end of the year in terms of, do we have our tiers set correctly and our averages and kind of the overall rate structure matching how we expected. I think generally speaking, the answer is still yes. We have our tiers in the right place. We're not seeing any major shifts so far, but we do need to kind of see the rest of this summer's data to confirm that.
But I still sometimes I see these slides now, the breakdown by tier, and I'm not really sure what the take-home message is or what I'm supposed to learn from this. For you, how does this improve kind of your understanding of our water use and budget?
I tend to generally agree with you. This isn't the most informative slide from my perspective. It's one that we actually discontinued for a while, and until we kind of realized there was other interests in it from other areas. To me, the different tier consumption needs a lot more than just this kind of a summary slide to show. I mean, the numbers don't move enough in here to really kind of see what's going on. I mean, you can see where the rate changes happen there in between fiscal year 23 and 24. You can see kind of those the decrease in the amount that was in tier one, and that was by design because we really changed where tier one cutoff was.
Yeah.
And so that was just a structural change that really made sense in the sense of how the water was being used. Since then, they've been close enough, and it's hard to really glean into what is that tier three or tier four or some of those super users overall percentage. So long way of saying I don't get a lot out of this slide. I just feel that we, some members of the public and some members, of the community do get more out of this. And so we provide it because we have the data. But when we take a look with our rate consultants, we obviously go a lot deeper than just this kind of one level summary look at this. And so we just put it there for public information.
I mean, I could just completely, be looking at it from one lens, but I would just, the majority of our customers are, I guess our residential customers are already using very little water.
Yeah.
And those that are using a lot of water are a very small minority of our customers, particularly the highest water users, the very small minority. So I look at this and I go, wow, most of our customers don't use much water. So anyway,
we can look for ways to improve this and kind of maybe expand upon it as we get to the summer, as we start really getting into kind of the rates and where we think, some of the different tier breaks should be. We can break this down and make it more useful. So this is just a summary slide. It really kind of encapsulates what we just talked about. Our revenues are about 9% below the budget for where we'd expect to be. That's driven largely by water consumption, which is 7% lower than last year and 9% lower than our 10-year average. I mentioned at the beginning, we typically have about 60% of our revenue for the first half of the year. We're only showing about 50%, in terms of overall our budget. So that's that 10% we're below. I mentioned that our revenues in the next 4 months are going to be the lowest in any year, just because those reflect our, winter and kind of, rainy months. So we're not expecting to see anything change here in the next 2 to 3 months. We'll be looking obviously very much more closely at the information we get over the summertime and as we get into the rate setting process. The good news, as I mentioned, is our generally speaking, our expenses are also below budget. So that'll help kind of offset the cash flow impact. Capital expenses will continue to spend as we kind of finish off our our projects. And so we are holding funds for those specifically, but we will see some operating budget savings that will help offset some of the impacts of the rates being low. And then we'll be working internally to kind of refine our year-end projections to give the board a sense of where we think we're going to end the year over the next 2 to 3 FAC meetings. We'll give you information on where we think we're going to end the year. And with that, I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Treasurer Kush, you have more? you wanna
No,
ask?
no.
You got them all out?
I'm
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brett. A couple of just questions. I am trying to be mindful of the fact that this, in some ways, is a really nice problem to have because people are getting the message and they're conserving. So if it is a permanent trend, I know that we changed the finance policy mid-year last year, if that's right, to allow for slightly greater risk and higher yield. Am I recollecting that right?
So we've made quite a few adjustments to our fiscal policies. I believe the one you're referring to now is our investment policy.
Yes, that's what I
So
mean.
with the cash we have on hand, it wasn't necessarily taking on more risk. It was just allowing other kind of safe instruments to be used.
That's
And so
right.
there's what's called JPAs, which are kind of grouped assets with other
Mhm.
agencies of our size and kind of in our industry. They have investment vehicles that are very similar in terms of backed by safe U.S. securities and kind of the bonds and the CDs and whatnot. So we just didn't have that as an allowable vehicle in our investment policy. And so as we scan the horizon, thinking where else can we put our money that's going to be safe and liquid and reliable, that was seemingly the best other vehicle rather than going into individualized assets that we had to manage ourselves.
Mhm.
And so that was the main change, was being able to use some of those other money markets, some of those other JPA type vehicles, which are still very safe and still kind of in that A+ range.
Did they have the same yields? I mean, was it really just to diversify, or was it also because I thought I recalled that they were pretty much very, very safe, but also had a slightly higher yield, or am I not remembering?
Well, the ones we've actually utilized have been similar yields to what we
Okay.
get out of LAIF. So LAIF is the local agency investment fund. That's where the majority of our investments are. And so we've been using them for years, and they're by design very safe and very liquid. The JPAs are similar to that in the sense that they have the same type of underlying investments. They also do offer kind of more longer term and kind of I should say kind of more individualized mutual funds that you can go farther out than LAIF typically does. So we have the option to do that, and that would give us more return. We haven't done that yet. So
Okay.
those are included in that overall investment vehicle, as you can do more term type investments where you're locking your money up a little bit longer for a little bit more return. We haven't done that, but we mentioned that would be a benefit as we go forward. If the kind of short-term rates start to drop, that would be where we can potentially, outpace what we would get with LAIF. But it's not something we're focusing on right now. We were just trying to find, the best use in the safe categories for our funds right now.
Has there been any attempt have you been thinking at all about, okay, well, if these numbers don't go up, is there a way to offset them at all with other things? I know we have some rental income, but is there anything out there that we could be doing that we're not?
Well, I hesitate to want to get into anything, risky or anything
Yeah.
where we're chasing those revenues. I think, typically speaking, we want to stay in our lanes in the sense of, we're a utility, first of all, we're not a financial institution. And so as long as we're being, kind of, responsible with our funds, getting the best returns that are out there in those safe categories, that's where I feel the most comfortable.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mean with a financial instrument. I just mean, have you given thought to however that could be doing the water rates differently or
Yeah, I mean, largely it is doing our rates, just kind of making sure we're getting the rates coming in to cover our costs, adjusting on the expenditure side and trying to save, where we can with our discretionary expenditures, as opposed to trying to kind of chase other forms of income. We do have rental income, like you mentioned. A lot of those are in longer term leases. Those do offset and they provide us with a lot of flexibility with our funding, but it's not something we've been aggressively trying to, expand necessarily.
Having just campaigned not that long ago and like seeing the incredible outrage over the rates, I just shudder to think about too big of an increase and how people will respond, and want people wanting to know that we've really looked at every possible avenue before we do that. Okay, any public comment on this?
There are none.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Brett. And We will now move on to 3E, which is the insurance brokerage and risk management services selection. I think that's also you.
All right. For this item, we have with us here Greg Plum, who is our finance management analyst. He has largely been driving this process. I'll kick it over to him to give kind of the basics and kind of the overview of what this is here. But as the board may recall, each year we have to go through the process of acquiring insurance for all of our assets here. We do that through a independent broker. And as Greg will talk about, there's a regular practice of going through an RFP for this and making sure, we're kind of scanning the market and making sure that we're getting the best value and the best services for the district. So we went through that process this year, and I will kick it over to Greg to talk through that.
Hi, nice to be here. Greg Plum, financial analyst. So as Brett mentioned, we put out an RFP for our insurance brokerage for our annual renewal of our insurance policies. We did that in November of this year. We identified about 5 firms that we sent it directly to, and it was also posted publicly on our website. Received 2 responses. One from our current broker, and then another from another broker that I'll move on to, Gallagher. And then we interviewed both of those candidates. Both provided very good, detailed proposals. There were some differences. We'll kind of go through that process. The panel was myself, Brett, and Shelley, who have all kind of worked on this through the years. So both of these firms, Alliant and Gallagher, are very large, global, reputable firms. They both conduct business extensively in our area, so they work with a number of comparable companies, which is sort of key for us to know that they offer this line of business. So for Alliant, they, for example, work with SFPUC, Irvine Ranch, and then Metropolitan Water District in Southern California. And for Gallagher, they work with EB Mud, Valley Water, and our neighbor North Marin Water. So both have, very, very good list of clients for us to compare to. One of the key differences between the proposals was with respect to the brokerage fee, and Gallagher's proposed fees was about 18% lower than what we're currently paying over 3 years, which is currently we're paying $70,000 a year in brokerage fees. So that would reduce brokerage fees potentially by about $37,000 over that period of time. In addition to that, the interview panel, I think, ranked Gallagher slightly higher overall. Obviously, this was a relatively informal process. We had a list of questions that we asked them in terms of their approach to the business. And one of the key things that we liked with Gallagher's approach was the way they market us to the insurance carriers themselves. So it would be our relationship manager with Gallagher who actually takes us to market and knows us, in more detail, and is able to sort of convey, hopefully why we deserve a slightly lower premium ultimately. So we like that. We also thought that the relationship manager gave a thoughtful approach to the entire process. She looked at the insurance policies we currently have in quite a lot of detail. She had comments about it, and we just appreciated that approach. So overall, ranked them slightly higher. So we do recommend that we proceed with a 3-year agreement with Gallagher as our broker of record for insurance management and risk management services as well. And we all felt that was the right decision to make. We have worked with Alliant since 2019, which was the result of an RFP process, which they were successful in because they had a lower fee proposal at the time. Prior to that, our broker of record was Gallagher. So we have this existing relationship with both companies, and it is the same relationship manager who knows the district very well. Yeah, so next steps would be to finalize the professional services agreement with Gallagher, to get board approval for the final agreement, which we're recommending we do for 3 years. We did get pricing for 5 years, but we think 3 years makes sense. And then we'll be looking to start the renewal process relatively soon, in February. It does take a little bit of time. There's lots of application forms to do, and switching companies will be an additional lift. And then looking forward, we'll kind of get into our regular cadence that we've had for the last few years, where we have a market update, and indicative pricing at the finance committee at the end of May, and then come to the board for approval to bind coverage for our July 1st annual renewal. So with that, if there's any questions.
Dr. Kush?
Thanks. Thank you, Greg, for the update. I mean, I don't have questions on the process and the selection of, or the recommended selection of Gallagher for brokerage services. But maybe just, reminds me about just other areas that I just would like to understand better. Now, I believe we self-insure in some areas at least.
Yeah.
So are those are specific insurance categories where we don't utilize a provider, insurance provider?
We still do for workers' comp. That's how we do that. And what happens is we pay a premium, and then it gets audited retroactively, and based on the claims that we have. And then sometimes we have to pay an additional premium, depending on, what was paid out.
What was paid out. Right. And then I'm also learning that the Association of California Water Agencies is part of a joint authority JPIA. I think, Molly, is that a Joint Powers Insurance Agency?
Yeah.
Is that something that we benefit from or could benefit from?
It's a risk pool that Aqua offers, specifically associated with Aqua. There are other risk pools in the state, so those are options.
So there's definitely many different options in terms of how to go about acquiring coverage. We've gone back and forth with Alliant and with Gallagher the last few years on the commercial lines. What you're referring to with Aqua and what Molly's referring to in the JPIAs, is just a different model where you're kind of more of an internal, almost like I talked about with investments, where you're kind of a smaller, risk pool and that's managed kind of internally. And so you're kind of more, it's more like a credit union would be for banks as opposed to a national bank, right? So you're pulling your assets together, you're creating your own policies, you have your own oversight board. There's a lot more individualized, treatment. And so they have their benefits, and we have looked into them, over the years, in terms of, what that would entail switching over to them. The application process is typically longer with them. It is more involved because they're really kind of bringing you into their risk pool, kind of more on an individual level. And at this point, we didn't really necessarily have, we didn't necessarily see some of the benefits that would go with that. And as Greg mentioned, it's a lift to shift kind of wherever you go. What we were looking for with this effort was just to kind of make sure within our current model of using commercial, brokerage firms, that we were getting the best deal, we were getting good advice, we had a good fresh look on our lines. And as you were just referring to earlier with our self-insurance lines, having a fresh eye on this from Gallagher and from a different, perspective than we had, we're hoping they'll be able to give us some advice on exactly that, on what's better to self-insure, what's not, where we should set our deductibles and our, overall, and kind of where the right, line is to draw in terms of how much risk we're taking on versus how much we're paying the insurance agencies to cover us for. There's also the claims administration on the backside and how much they help you when you do have an issue. And so we're looking into kind of the service levels we get there and on what other services they can provide. And we have been in discussions with Molly and with Ben as well over, when would be the right time maybe to kind of take a deeper dive into looking at things like Aqua. But that wasn't a part of this effort here.
Okay.
That wasn't this effort, but it was over the last couple of years, Brett and his team did look into it with a non-trivial effort. And generally, I'd say finding that many, if not most of the members are kind of smaller, kind of irrigation district folks. The larger utilities don't seem to be in that. And maybe as a resultant, there was, I would say, not a cold reception, but it wasn't warm either. It was like, whoa, and it felt like a very long process to get there. And maybe we could, and maybe it'd be a benefit. Also, indications were it wasn't going to necessarily be cost effective. Maybe service would be different, maybe better, that sort of thing, but not necessarily a big savings or even any savings in costs. So it's interesting. But regardless, I mean, I do think over time, and I think Brett as well, we should look at all the options and really understand, is there something better? Because the costs are brutal and they're only going up, and we know all that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the presentation we had last year on the costs of insurance. It was
Yeah.
pretty sobering. Okay, yeah, well, good. Thank you for those updates. I hope Gallagher, is a good partner in continuing to evaluate what makes the most sense for the district, if we ultimately go with them. Now, I just cannot resist this because, I don't get to see Greg very often, and committees like this, I think, are supposed to be a little less formal. So, are you ready for low gap?
I'm not going to be at low gap this year.
It's a bike race. Sorry, guys. I just know he's.
I'm ready. I've done the last 3 years and need a break.
Okay, good. I'm done. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you. One thing that I was a little confused about in the material you provided, I thought that generally the brokerage fees came from the the actual insurance company that we end up contracting with. We pay for all those fees.
So we pay our broker here, as Greg mentioned, it's in the 55, I think it's 58,000 here, in order to kind of apply for all the different lines of insurance we're going to be
I
getting.
see.
So they're kind of the middleman, the broker in this case. They're marketing us, they're taking our case, they're getting our information, they're trying to find the lowest rates, they're giving us our options. Once they identify those lines of coverage, then that's the bigger expenditure. That's the $2 million a year expenditure to actually secure each of those lines of insurance going forward. And so this is really just kind of the broker services to identify the potential lines going forward. In terms of commissions, we have, the part of the offering here from Gallagher, and it was similar with Alliant, is that they then give us an opt-out form for public agencies not to have to pay any commissions on their side. So they're not getting commissions from the actual insurance
see.
they're selling. They're getting this fixed fee each year, just what we're paying them to give us the service of finding that for us. So we do opt out of paying them any
I
additional
see.
commissions.
So it must be standard in an agency as opposed to an individual, right? We're paying them for their time, their services. to us,
Yeah, that's
essentially,
exactly what it is,
not
yeah.
a percentage of, okay.
Yep.
And then I was curious, Greg, what you said about that they go directly to the market as opposed to, do some places kind of bundle a bunch of potential buyers of policies and then kind of market those people, or how is that different?
They just have a different sort of organizational structure. So you would have our relationship manager, and then there would be a different group that then takes,
I see.
all of the utility insurance to market.
That might not know us as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the
Interesting.
idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, she sounds great. The person, I really like that she looked at everything, and not knowing if you were going to choose them, it sounds like you got some helpful feedback regardless. So great. Any public comment on this?
There are none.
Great. So thank you both very much. I think that is all on that item. Okay. So we have our next meeting coming up on February 26th, 2026. And I think with that, we can adjourn. Yeah. How satisfying.